Well, I would say this. The most important message here is that the government has not decided. Well, I would say this. The most important message here is that the government has not decided. Well, I would say this. The most important message here is that the government has not decided. Well, I would say this. The most important message here is that the government has not decided. Well, I would say this. The most important message here is that the government has not decided. Well, I would say this. The most important message here is that the government has not decided. Well, I will say this. The most important message here is that the government has not Well, I will say this. The most important message here is that the government has not Well, I will say this. The most important message here is that the government has not Well, I will say this. The most important message here is that the government has not Well, I will say this.
Hello, fellow Liberians. Hello, Liberians in Liberia and in the diaspora. Hello, fellow Liberians in the diaspora and at home. The video that you were just looking at, a video from the Ministry of Transport. Apparently, the civil service director has gone to the Ministry of Transport to address some crisis there. And as you listen to the journalist, he was being booed by the workers. He was being booed by the workers. And the reason why he was booed by the workers are simple. They do not see the civil service boss as being in the interest of the workers. He was booed because the workers feel that the civil service boss is in connivance with others to tamper with what we call in like the bread and butter issue. Their jobs are going to be affected. And why their jobs are going to be affected is because of a crisis with the Ministry of Transport regarding the LTMR concession controversy. The dispute centers on a 25 years concession agreement between the government of Liberia and Liberia Traffic Management Incorporated, a private company contracted to manage key traffic services in the country. And there are people who believe that this company came in during the latter part of the early administration, and the current police director was at the front line of this company. And the only reason why the company did not succeed was because that administration ended with the election of the CDC to power. And so during the CDC administration, this company still continued to make effort to assume these powers, this concession that they actually have now. Here's the dispute center on a 25 years concession agreement between the government of Liberia and the Traffic Management Incorporated, which is a private company. But under the concession, LTMR is given authority over several functions that had historically been carried out by the Ministry of Transport, including the vehicle registration, driver license issuance, traffic enforcement system, and toll collection, vehicle inspection services. These were functions carried on by the Transport Ministry. But here is the point of contention. Critics argue that these responsibilities are core statutory functions of the Ministry of Transport and should not be outsourced to private foreign entities. Now, I am a strong proponent of a small, efficient government. And the whole time I work with the Governance Commission, particularly in the public sector reform area, and of course, I work on the mandate and function review specifically for the Ministry of Transport as well. We design a governance architecture that tend to put functions that could best be provided, efficiently be provided by the private sector to be outsourced. So most of the functions in our governance architecture and the design framework of the new Ministry of Transport that we propose will have been outsourced anyway. But all of the work that we do follow a structural pattern. So the critics has a serious point. What are responsibilities, core responsibilities that are given to the ministry statutorily through the legislature passing an act creating the ministry and designating certain functions of the ministry? What are those functions? Can be outsourced without regard to the necessary amendment to the act creating the ministry. So this controversy escalated into workers' protest and institutional unrest at the ministry. Transport ministry employees staged demonstration outside the ministry in Monrovia, temporarily halting normal operation. They blocked entrances to the ministry. They carried placards demanding cancellation of the concession. In fact, they went to the legislature, and on their way to the legislature, the police beat on them and blooded some of them. I watched the video. The police beat on them and blooded some of them. I think it was the spokesperson or the workers or president or so. But some of them were beaten on, and some of them went to studio and they talk about this concessions and how it was bad for the ministry, so to speak. So the worker says that the deal will effectively render the staff idle because the system they once operated have been transferred to LTMI. And that is the truth. You will have redundant workers because they are assigned to the ministry implementing a particular function. If there is no transitional provision that clearly states what you're going to be doing with those workers, there is a temptation that they will think and they will believe strongly that you are going to get rid of them, because if they are going to the ministry and have no work to do, then they are just good to be terminated, because government cannot waste resources on people who are idle. So if the workers feel that they are going to be idle by the transfer of these functions to a private entity, and there is no transitional provisions that says whether these workers can move over to those private entities with a kind of collaboration between the private entities and government, such that the workers who move over to the private entities still retain some of their benefits with government, that they're not going to lose their privilege as civil servant altogether. Or if they're going to lose their privilege as civil servant, then maybe you want to find a severance package for them in addition to them getting a job with this private entity. This is, something that everybody is a natural instinct that the workers will think about. Now, before I move any further with what I'm saying, I want you to just listen to one of the workers ranting about the situation. Yeah, let me get this worker on, and then you get to understand what I'm talking about. It's nothing to take lightly, because everything that we do as responsible government must take into consideration the interests of our people, and we ought to be very responsible in dealing with those issues. Whenever changes, whenever reform is being instituted, it has to be conducted in a structural, systematic way. It cannot be haphazard. Somebody has interest in a particular company, bring the company, sign a concession, does not get the workers involved, and it leads to protest. Something that could be easily understood, it leads to protest. So listen to this CSA worker, not CSA worker, but transport ministry worker. She lament the situation at the ministry.
By the legislature.
I said all of them would die. They would die. The people would die. All the people that would die in the name of Jesus. Last time I never slept. I'm sorry about that day. They would die. All of them would die. I swear to God they would die. Because the children, I forget about vote. We're not talking about Liberia. I'm talking about fucking vote. I'm talking about Liberia. That Liberia I'm talking about right now. All of them would die. They would die. The children would die. The generation would die. We working here. We are happy. They're making millions of dollars. They don't want to take our chicken cheese for us. What's that? What would that in a wire that we're not supposed to be having in Liberia? What Liberia market Liberians?
How has the traffic management team, how has it affected you?
That's a lie. That's a lie. No, that's not the problem. The CSA director has the problem here 3 times. No, the problem here for that liberty. So when they take SOC and they will fire people, they lie to us. And we're not going to take it. We're not taking it to jail. We're not taking it to borrow.
How long you been in the ministry?
I've been since 13 years. 13 years.
This is the first of it kind we see.
First time in history.
What is your role here?
I'm a full red question. I'm a full red question by working here. We don't put our feet down in this country. The people will still not.
The only issue with it do is that it will take job from you.
Of course, man. Can't go Lebanese man. Just let me tell you one thing. There were Lebanese people. All my life I work for Lebanese people. Before I kill a minister of transport, Lebanese people just getting in the movement of war ground. They'll bring all the Lebanese people from Lebanon to work here. And they will fire Liberia for the little of thing. Even he can't let them fire you. Say anything for the seven, the poor continue to step down us. Say anything for the seven. What happened now? What was that? I want to see Joseph Baka. I want to see Joseph Baka. I want to see him.
For the fact that this deal was approved by the legislature and signed by the president, your advocacies will not change anything. You will be. I said this deal was approved by the national legislature. They observe all these concerns you're raising. They took that into consideration.
You know how many times the president was the one that the president was the one that say transport is the president was the one that transport responsible for driverless and car motor vehicle. Why not? Why?
So yes, this is a transport ministry employee ranting about the situation that is ongoing. And as you listen to her, the major concern is that they are going to be taking off their jobs. They are going to lose their jobs. That is the major concern. That is the major concern from the employee. She's concerned that they are going to be losing their jobs. And so This is a bread and butter issue that we are talking about. And if, for instance, we cannot see what exactly is going to happen to these people, if we cannot say what exactly is going to happen to these people, then it means that we did not do the deal very well. And so the civil service boss went to talk to the angry crowd. Now it was a belated talk. In the process of doing all of these changes, effecting all of these changes, the civil service supposed to make sure they communicated with the workers, make sure they get the workers involved with the changes that they are making, and make sure that the workers understand that it's in the best interest of our country. And of course, the workers wouldn't understand if they are going to lose their jobs. So it is a responsibility of the civil service agency to make sure that the workers do not lose their jobs. And part of not losing their jobs would mean that if they are receiving pay from the civil service, they must have work to do. They are very much aware that in the absence of all of these functions, the ministry cannot be able to accommodate the huge number of people who are going to be displaced by the transfer of this function to a private entity. And you're not going to convince them that, nobody's job is taken away. You're not going to be convinced until you tell them that, the CSA has redirected you to this particular function. There are other places that these people can work. Some of the pool of workers that are affected could move over to the new agency that was established, that ACO agency that was established, the yellow machine, or I don't know how to call it, yellow machine board. Yes, you could move some of these people to the yellow machine board. So let's listen to the civil service boss again after he was booed and the journalist asked him the question, what he said. We have a maximum intolerance. If people are not willing to listen to the civil service boss talking about that.
Well, I will say this. The most important message here is that the government has not.
So the most important message is that the government has not dismissed anybody. But that is not enough for the civil servant. They know that dismissal can be construed from the action. That is what we call constructive dismissal. When dismissal is apparent from the action of the government, then that is constructive dismissal. Because anybody who is in the employ of government should have a designated work to do. a designated tax. You can be in the employ of government and you do not have a function, and then you get paid every time. You have reason to construe this measure just because you are not working for the pay that you are receiving. So the people are right to have the apprehension that they have. They are right to be apprehensive. They are right to be apprehensive. They are right that workers risk losing their jobs. The workers are saying that the deal effectively render ministry staff idle because the system they once operated have been transferred to LTMR. One of the reporters, the employee told reporters that staff now go to work just to sit and chat because the operational system have been disabled. So who goes to work just to sit and chat? I know people might do that sometimes, but that is is a result of a failed bureaucracy. But this one is being institutionalized. So what we are learning is that based on the concession, LTMR will receive 70% of the revenue and give the government 30%. So just from the face of this thing, if LTMR is receiving 70% of the revenue and giving the government 30%, assuming then it is for every $100 that I get from carrying out these functions, say driver licensing, for every $100 LTMR gets, what happens? They take $70 and give the government $30. Whereas in the case of the Ministry of Transport, the government will get the entire $100. Let's say part of that $100 they use to pay salaries. Says for instance, for every $100 that they get, let's say they take $30 to pay salary. For every $100, the government take $30 to pay salary. So when everything was in the domain of the transport ministry, the government will be making $70 and transport ministry $30. But now that it has moved out of the domain of the transport ministry, for every $100, the government gets only $30 and LTMR gets $70. Now these workers at transport ministry who were previously performing the function that has been moved to LTMR are still on government payroll, and therefore the $30 that government receive, government still has to pay those people. So when you look at the entire deal in that light, you know that it is a bad deal. It is a bad deal. Government is going to be affected. So why will our people look at a bad deal and care less about the fact that it is a bad deal and want to proceed with it to the point of beating Liberians, to the point of denying them opportunity and the likes? Why would we want to do that? Data of Liberians data are very important. When you go to do vehicle registration and you go to get your driver license and you get your license plate, you provide certain information, your bio data to the ministry. Now those information are going to be provided to a foreign company. What do they do with your information? Most times, this company can take your information, your private information, especially when you have a government that did not put in any mechanism to protect your private information. Those people can take your information and sell it. They can take your information and sell it. So in any case, Liberians are not benefiting because the money that goes to government will have to take that money and pay those people at transport ministry who are not doing anything. And so the only place that people who are involved with this deal, the only place that they are going to benefit from is the 70% that goes to this private company. And some of them have connection with the private company, like they say, the police director has connection with this private company, and so he's going to be getting his share from this private company. But the problem with these kinds of things is that if you put the money in the hands of these foreigners, the moment you leave power, you have no more access to these funds that you put in their hands. But the thing is, you have already raped the country of 70%. You made this bad deal with the expectation that you are going to be having your courts. But if you are no more in a position to protect these people, then your court cannot continue to run. So the bad deal that you made simply because of your selfish interest is going to be the one that is going to cost the Liberian people poverty. So this is the problem that we continue to experience in our society. We have to find a way to change some of these things. We have to find a way to change some of these things. I understand that when people get to the legislature, they tend to be consumed by the politics at the legislature. And of course, they get affected. They get affected. The legislative politics are numbers. But you can still play the normal game when you are very effective in communicating your position. Because it does not mean that you have to sacrifice the interests of the Liberian people just because it's a normal game. Every representative and senator in the legislature understand that they represent the Liberian people, and the Liberian people, when they go to vote, based on your performance, they vote you out. Most of the time, if people don't perform well, they get voted out. They get voted out of power. So we really got to be very focused when we are serving our people. When we are serving our people, we got to be focused. We got to understand that no matter what, we must always put our countries first. Now, the deal itself, you can see how selfish it is. The company gets 70% and the state gets 30%. Meanwhile, the state has a burden to continue to pay those people who were previously doing the job. So except somebody come and say what benefit the state is going to get, it's difficult for me to comprehend how the state is going to benefit from this deal. Many critics have argued that the arrangement could result in the loss of public revenue. Instead of $100 going to the Liberia Revenue Authority, only $30 is going to go to the Liberia Revenue Authority. And there is going to be weak oversight state functions. For example, if this institution is in conflict with the Ministry of Transport, they're not going to see the Ministry of Transport as that regulatory body and that oversight body that has control over the work that they do. And we talk about the transfer of sensitive national data to private foreign firms. What do you think they're going to do with it? They will sell it. They will sell it. Some lawmakers have even raised national security concerns, particularly regarding biometric vehicle data being controlled by private entities. These are things that we as a country should not rush with. And one of the things that the lady said in that video is that our leaders must sell us one day with some of these silly decisions that they make. You are in haste to line your pocket, and just because you want to get rich, and this is one of the reasons why we don't see rich people in Liberia. It is difficult for you to see the likes of Musa Ability, because people get their money from government and they are hiding it. They hide the money until they are deaf. And foreigners who who are their business partner walk away with those money. That's how the foreigner get rich. Because they're not going to entrust Liberians with confidential information, to their wealth. Because a typical Liberian would say, oh, but this man is stealing my country money, and why should I do this? So they're not going to trust the Liberians with that. They're going to go to the foreigners because the foreigner doesn't care. You bring the money, I pretend to be keeping it. If something happens to you, I can, just free you up. That is why our country is poor. Because people think about the little crumbs that they are going to get, and they shortchange the country along with foreigners. That is the situation that happens with Arthur Easy, a Nigerian businessman who came to the country, was able to get a $10 million deal with the country, oil block deal with the country, push $1 million through the back door to bribe some of these people, and some of them thought that the $1 million was just sufficient. They were happy. But this guy understood the game. He understood the game. And so he gave the $1 million and the $10 million for the oil block, the $1 million bribe, the $10 million for the oil block. The man who received the $1 million, like people like Robert Salif there, they were happy. They are rich by Liberia standard. But this guy was able to put this oil block on the international market and receive 300 million for it. Something that he paid just 10 million for. He received $300 million for it. If somebody is able to shortchange our official, a whole country like that, how do you think he's going to consider the Liberian people? Stupid. Stupid. But some of these people who think that they are rich in Liberia, they wouldn't consider themselves stupid, but I think that they are stupid. They are very foolish people. The current group of people who are in power and who are feasting on the Liberian people money, they are not the first. There are others who were over there before who stole the Liberian people money and they went down the drain. Wealth is good if it is retained in the country where everybody else is able to benefit somehow. The controversy at the ministry reached the legislature, of course, and the legislature represents the people, the Liberian people. The Liberian Senate voted to suspend the implementation of the LTMI concession and order a full investigation into the agreement. The lawmakers were arguing the concession could weaken the authority of the Ministry of Transport. They argued that the deal could lead to significant revenue losses for the state. Essential regulatory power may be transferred to a private company, meaning that the ministry might not have that regulatory power, that power to oversee the function of the private entity. At one point, the House of Representatives also supported halting the company operation pending investigation. But they didn't. They didn't. The crisis generated legal battles. The crisis generated legal battle. There has been dispute over whether the concession violated the act establishing the Ministry of Transport and whether key provisions of the agreement were altered or inconsistently interpreted. And also the big deal was which institution legally controls vehicle licensing and registration, because Transport Ministry was doing that. At the same time, LTMR was doing that. They did not put a stop to LTMR. So LTMR operation was arbitrary. The police director had interest, and the police director uses his portfolio to protect LTMR and instructed his police to enforce the LTMR deal. While investigation was going on, the investigation did not put a halt to LTMR. The investigation did not put a halt to LTMR. The investigation did not put a halt to LTMR. So that there is a serious problem. Many argue, and I see their argument, that the concession contradicts the law that created a ministry which mandates the ministry to regulate transport and traffic system nationwide. But the police director and many of the government officials who support this arrangement says that this is modernization. It will modernize the Liberian traffic management system. Of course, we want the traffic management system to be modernized. At the ministry is chaotic. We want the traffic management system to be modernized. And I know the people at the ministry themselves want the traffic management system to be modernized. It will reduce road accident. I don't see how it's going to reduce road accident. They will introduce digital licensing and registration system. Of course, the ministry can do the same. Of course, the ministry can do the same. And improve road safety enforcement. The project was originally framed as a $50 million investment to modernize traffic service in Liberia. $50 million investment. So do we have that $50 million investment in Liberia right now? That is what they try to convince the Liberian people. Mr. Smith,
Come
are
on,
you
Willie.
ready? Are you ready? You don't
Have
seem
you
to be
read in your
you don't seem to be set.
Uh,
You don't seem to be set, Mr. Smith. Please adjust yourself, and the reflection from the light above you is not good. Okay, you look better
is it
now.
better now?
Yeah. So
All right,
I
let
was
me.
just giving a little highlight about the crisis today, at the crisis at the Ministry of Transport. Today, the director of the civil service was booed.
Well, I would say this. The most important message here is that the government has not dismissed.
So the most important message he says is that the government has not dismissed anybody. Yeah, so it's like dismissal is contemplated, but the government has not dismissed anybody. He's aware that dismissal should follow after the concession. So this was the situation at the ministry, and it's true that many people at the ministry think that the LTMR concession is definitely going to result into dismissal of a lot of people. Uh, Welcome, Mr. Smith. What is your understanding of this concession, and what is your take regarding that?
Thank you very much. The situation is a very delicate matter. Firstly, it is government fiduciary responsibility to improve its infrastructure, to improve its facility, to build its civil servants capacity. That thing must conform to the contemporary realities of the day with respect to new software, technological sophistication, and if the government is not divesting her responsibility, it means essentially the Ministry of Transport has been paralyzed. Because the motor vehicle used to be under the Ministry of Finance, and there was school of thoughts for the very right reason that the motor vehicle should be under the Ministry of Transport. You are in America here, the MDV is not under the Treasury Department. So for very good reasons, the motor vehicle department went under the Ministry of Transport. Now, the Transport Ministry is a very important ministry. It is one of the data producing ministry. There are data user and data producing institutions. Speaking from the lady's background, and so the transport ministry should be tracking basic information of the citizenry and those who are living in the country. It captures the bio data of all those who are of driving ages. All right, it up to provide the data as to how many vehicles are plying the streets in our country, the categories of vehicles. All right. And they are also a major revenue generating institution of government. So all these key and pivotal role the transport ministry has to play as per the statute creating the institution. Interestingly, the statute has not been repealed. The statute has not been repealed. The statute is intact, but the function, the fiduciary function, critical responses of the transport ministry are now being divested to LMTR. And I have understood and appreciated how the government brought in LMTR to work with the transport ministry, maybe spend some time at the transport ministry to build the capacity of the staff there and improve the infrastructure. Because first you need to put in the infrastructure that you need to deal with all of these issues with respect to efficiency and a one-stop shop approach. Interestingly, unfortunately, that is not the case. That is not the case. If LMTR was domiciled within the Ministry of Transport, that would have been much more appreciated. But to divert the function and responsibility of the Transport Ministry for how many years the concession agreement? I'm not
25
hearing you,
years.
Committee.
The concession
For
agreement is
25 years. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. Then on top of that, there is an issue of litigation between the government of Liberia and MDMC, who is reported to have entered an agreement with the government of Liberia to deal with the production of the vehicle registration and license plate. My understanding is that matter is before the Supreme Court. That matter has not been heard. And so you have a triangle of confusion. The employees are in a dilemma. Their hopes are being dashed. They don't know their future because the Civil Service Director General attempted to be politically correct to say, as far as I'm concerned, no one has been dismissed. What he's essentially saying is that you people are going to be dismissed, but for now, you are not dismissed yet. And so the employees are in limbo. The employees are in limbo, serious limbo. The MDMC, who has an existing contract with the government of Liberia through the Ministry of Transport, is seeking litigation. The act, the statute creating the Ministry of Transport has not been repealed. So you see the huge confusion there coming with it. So that's my intro.
yeah, certainly it's a big a problem. Now, everybody in Liberia, in the diaspora, expected that this government would be a very responsible government. Everybody, because one, this government is headed by somebody who has been in politics, who has been in the bureaucracy for almost 50 years, rising to the level of vice president and now president. So he comes with a wealth of experience. He comes with a wealth of experience. Everybody will expect that the government will follow the rule of law. Tiawon Gonglo will say it every time. If you undermine the rule of law, you undermine everything. How can this government be in such a rush to the point where they ignore the law? Because it's obvious that when you have a statute, you know, I work with the Governance Commission, and we instituted a whole lot of reform in the country. But we could not shut down the Ministry of Planning without repealing the act creating the Ministry of Planning. And we could not expand the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning without an amendment to the act creating the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning, the Ministry of Finance.
Exactly.
We created the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning. We had to take into consideration that unlike other countries, our ministries are established by statute. And so if you are changing and the statute spell out the functions, the core functions of the ministry, the statute spell them out. The statute goes further to spell out the departments. So in the first place, Joseph Boakai administration should not think that reform at the finance ministry started under the Boakai administration. No. Reform at the transport ministry started under the early administration. At the Governance Commission, we did a full-scale mandate and function review at the Ministry of Transport. And the documents are available. The documents are available. We did a full-scale mandate and function review for the Ministry of Transport. And it will tell you that those functions that can better be performed by the private sector, the Ministry of Transport is going to outsource them. So that the Ministry of Transport focuses on policy, regulation, data collection, and analysis to inform your policy formulation and regulation function. So when the government is trying to institute such a measure, it's only necessary that they move forward with the reform agenda, they move forward with the reform process specific to the Ministry of Transport. The Governance Commission is there. The mandate area responsible for public sector reform is there. They have initiated something. You don't move ahead with strategic reform arbitrarily. And if you ignore the fact that the ministry was created by a statute, then you are running a government like somebody who has not ran a government before. You take arbitrary decisions. You don't outsource government, the function of government ministry just by decree or by concession agreement. You got to be able to repeal or amend the act creating the ministry. That is fundamental to the rule of law. Our democracy has come this far to be governed by semblance of dictatorship. Because if you ignore the rule of law and you are doing something, then you are introducing a strong man position. And once you introduce a strong man position, that's dictatorship. Concession cannot repeal the act creating the ministry. So the government has to actually do well. And when something abrogates or stray away from the law, a concession that violates the law, is not going to stand the test of time. Because if you have a 25 years concession and it is inconsistent with the law of our country, as soon as the administration leaves power, what's going to happen? Another administration can come to power and say, oh no, you signed this agreement, but you were in error. As much as the Liberian government was in error. So both parties were in error, and so therefore we need to review. And in the process of reviewing, the people can cut your concession to 1 year. You will have absolutely no point, because in the concession, you're not going to be able to show any kind of reliance interest. So this is a terrible thing, that is happening in our country.
I mean, you are right. There's absolutely no blueprint and roadmap. You stress about this reform that emanated from the governance commission. Using the Ministry of Finance, the merger of the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Planning. And so there was a lot of chemistry put in place. The Ministry of Finance, merged with the Ministry of Planning and became the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning. Those departments, those units, every unit from the Ministry of Planning were incorporated into the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning. Assets and liability of the Ministry of Planning and the Ministry of Finance became asset and liability of the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning. The Department of Revenue that was under the Ministry of Finance became the Liberia Revenue Authority as a result of the same reform policy that emanated from the Governance Commission. Assets and liability of the Revenue Department of the then Ministry of Finance became asset and liability of the Liberia Revenue Authority. The National Bureau of Concessions was the Bureau of Concession under the Ministry of Finance. As a result of that, consequent upon those reforms, the Bureau of Concession became the National Bureau of Concession. Therefore, assets and liabilities, the entire staff, the entire division moved with the National Bureau of Concessions. Then the issue of knowledge transfer committee, because you stress that given the technical work that was done at the Governance Commission, it was established that those things that the Transport Ministry might not be able to deal with, even though it is their fiduciary responsibility or statutory responsibility, the statute provides for them as the ministry, the owner, to outsource. So when you outsource as the owner of a project, you are not detached from the project. But in the instant case, the Ministry of Transport, the division of motor pool or motor division, has been detached completely from this LMTR operation. So you say 12 years, 25 years LMTR. After 25 years, who takes over? LMTR is not a government entity. If LMTR leaves today, they leave with their what? Their assets.
Yeah.
Okay? They leave with their assets. So what happened to the transport business again? It becomes a graveyard. So knowledge transfer is very important. Knowledge transfer, institutional memory. All right? These softwares, these technological devices that purportedly that LMTR has that they will be using, the staff at the Ministry of Transport have the capacity that you can build on for them to be orientated, to have that orientation with it, to be able to use the very machines or system. Okay? So there is no knowledge transfer, there is no roadmap, there is no blueprint. All that is happening is, I heard you in your opening, individuals stand to personally benefit economically from the deal. Meanwhile, the country suffer. Meanwhile, civil servants at the transport ministry, the division of motor pool becomes vulnerable, and the country, because those are national security, those data should not be in the hands of outside ability. Who is managing the database? Who is the database manager at LM? It's not a Ministry of Transport employee. Okay? The same thing at immigration and get contract, they want Indian men to be producing resident permit somewhere on 12 14th Street. They want small. These are critical national data that has national security implication. How can you just gamble it to outsiders?
So
That
if
data,
the Indian man is producing a resident permit, why a Liberian company cannot be entrusted to produce resident permit?
because the mentality of our people, the
You don't
mentality of
want
our people,
a Liberian company to get rich.
they no, they don't
Or
want
you
to
want
create
an
like
Indian man, to get rich because you go to the Indian man and get kickback.
and
But
get feedback.
your kickback can
Even
only
another
last as long as you are in power. After you leave power, the men stop giving you your kickback. If you are getting 30% kickback, the men takes the entire 100%. That's stupidity.
It's appalling. It's appalling. It's a horrible situation. It's very distasteful. And the country suffers. I mean, we should be going forward and we are taking action that will hurt the country further. You compromising your national data. You don't know the people back end, their data back end. Who are they feeding information to? How many servers they have? You don't know why they have servers outside the country, really? All right. So the data management is being overlooked. Civil servants at the transport ministry are being exposed. They are vulnerable. They got no job security. Because it's two ways. If you want to come and lie, you want to be politically correct. The joker is saying, as far as I'm concerned, nobody has not been dismissed. Even though essentially he's saying people will be dismissed, but not now. Okay, even if people are not dismissed, are you supposed to be paying them for not working with it? They just will kind of sound. You want to make the people dumber? They just sit down, kind of wear and sound them more, and you pay them. Is that what government's supposed to be doing with it? Everybody just drive on the house in the morning, can sit down and take pay. So the whole thing is, it's really disturbing and it's sinful.
And
It's sinful.
the due, according to the due, government supposed to receive 30% of the revenue that's generated, and the private company takes 70% just for collecting
So that's
government revenue.
good.
Just for collecting government revenue.
Yes, that say as compared to what government is generating from transport ministry now, what are the indicators?
No, there's no guarantee.
It's disappointing. It's disappointing. You have 100% access to your revenue generated under the current transport arrangement, which goes to the consolidated account. As opposed to, because the company that is reporting here, no monitor evaluation mechanism in place. How do you determine the 30%? What is even the actual revenue that came to with it?
But here is a stupid a display of stupidity and ignorance. Here is a letter from the Ministry of Transport. You getting me?
Yeah.
Yeah, here is a letter from the Ministry of Transport.
That's a
right?
joint release. I don't know what's the assigning joint release on a particular sector ministry.
Yeah.
And
I mean, yeah, the civil service agency, here is what they're saying. They're saying this transition represents a deliberate restructuring of institutional roles. While LTMI will now manage the transactional and operational component of licensing and registration on behalf of the Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Transport its core mandate in policy development, regulation, oversight, compliance monitoring, and enforcement. The reform creates a clear separation between service delivery and regulatory supervision, enabling strong, accountable, and improved performance oversight. So they are suggesting that just by a stroke of a pen, you just read letter, that is how government reform can take place on a piece of paper, right? And you take the people function from there, and you say that they are limited to this other function. Yes, these are some of the functions that they should be carrying on. Yes, very good, but that is not the way it should be done. I mean, this paper is not an amendment to the act creating the ministry.
Absolutely not. Or else they will reference the section or the subsection in the act. Beyond that, really, as ugly as it is, let's take it at a fair value. That release they talk about oversight. They talk about monitoring evaluation. How can they both perform oversight, monitor, evaluate, isolation? So they both recently now on Ashmont Street.
And I have problem with the civil service agency boss, because the civil service agency is an integral part of the reform process in Liberia. There are people at the civil service agency who understand the reform process. They understand that the Ministry of Transport was undergoing reform, and that reform has to be concluded. They understand that certain function of the ministry is supposed to be severed from the ministry. How long is it going to take them, the same rush that they were in, to make sure that LTMI get their contract? How long was it going to take them to make sure that they institute the reform at the ministry, take the draft bill to the legislature for the legislature to pass a new bill that speak to all of these things that the civil service agency put in a letter?
But
Why
even
would
the
we want to
legislature,
compromise the rule of law every time? And
even the legislature
we're
is
running
complicit on
government.
this. Even the legislature is complicit on this matter. The legislature, the governance commission, they are all enabling an arbitrary, unconstitutional, or statutory action.
I mean, but the governance commission is weak at the moment. The governance commission, for example, the act required that most of us or technical staff are contracted, right? They are not supposed to be paid directly by the civil service agency, but it's the civil service agency that controls the governance commission payroll at the moment. And the head of the governance commission has not been commissioned. So the head of the governance commission can be dismissed at will at any time. So they don't have the will to be able to speak to some of these governance challenges, because the governance commission was put in place by the Accra Comprehensive Peace Agreement, first and foremost, to make sure that some of these bad tenants, the tenants of bad governance, are not going to resurface in our country. So when you undermine the rule of law, the governance commission is supposed to come and say, oh, let's call you to attention. We are not supposed to move on with these things without following the process. That is why every reform that the governance commission undertook to take the social welfare function from the Ministry of Health to the Ministry of Gender, there has to be an amendment to the Ministry of Health, the act creating the Ministry of Health, which at the same time, the amendment to the act creating the Ministry of Gender to make it gender, children, and social protection. So you don't, but by that amendment, you have the new Ministry of Health and not the Ministry of Health and Social Welfare. And then you have the Ministry of Gender, Children, and Social Protection. You have, as much as you want to carry on the reform, the law says that these acts are statute. So you have to take it back to the legislature and say, legislature, let's make these changes. If you don't do that, then you want to reinstitute what Ellen Johnson Sirleaf referred to as imperial presidency. And when you reinstitute imperial presidency, we are going to the dark days. We should not be injuring our democracy with the wealth of experience that this government has come back to power with. It's wrong.
So this is a very delicate matter, and I think maybe we need to delve into it more tomorrow. It's unfortunate that a 25 years investment has no roadmap, has no blueprint. We see the determination and willingness to empower a corporate institution at the detriment of the government and people of Liberia. And so there is a need to challenge this because, like I said, a disaster is waiting to happen. There is no clear roadmap in terms of an effective monitoring and evaluation regime. The governance aspect is lacking. The civil servants have been made vulnerable. It's almost like eventually they been redundant. They are redundancy in essence because their function has been taken from them, leaving them with nothing to do and being divested, outsourced to a company for 25 years. And that company, which should have been domiciled at the Ministry of Finance, working along with the Ministry of Transport, working along with the Ministry of Transport in there to improve the infrastructure there, to improve the software, whatever software they are bringing, to train the staff there, that there will be a local content, that if the so-called 25-year concession agreement will go through, based on the capacity built internally, that local content will be there when there is a transfer. In the event where the government discontinue the agreement, there will be
Comrade Smith,
yeah.
one of my major frustration, and that's my frustration with the WIA administration as well as the Boaka administration. Sometimes our government should be very deliberate in terms of making Liberian millionaires.
Sometimes or all the time.
Sometimes you gotta be very, very deliberate in terms of making Liberian millionaires. Simple things like license plates, what you guys are coming to do is something that Liberians can do. If you pull up a bid and request for Liberians to submit bid for those things, you'll be surprised the number of Liberians in the diaspora and other places who can do similar work, and by doing so, they are going to be clean, very clean millionaires. Millionaires are not going to be stealing from. They are not going to steal from the Liberian government. They make their money clean, and they will. Once they have the money, you will see how some of them will contribute to the development in the country, like Musa Belede is doing now. He's only able to do it because he has clean millions. If somebody has dirty million, they keep it in the dark. They will never bring it outside. They don't want people to know. What we have been producing over time are people who steal money from government, and therefore they are unable to expose it. So these kinds of projects all around the country are going to Lebanese around. These kind of projects are projects that supposed to be in the hands of Liberians. What is that other project for the shipping inspection? The shipping inspection. These are things that Liberians can do. Why would we want to be giving these things up to foreigners just because we want kickback? It's almost like you have your food, you give it to somebody else, and they give you few spoons to eat. Your own food. That is sheer stupidity, and it angers me a lot because if a lot of Liberians are millionaires by winning government contracts, if a lot of Liberians become millionaires by winning government, I don't care who it is. There are a lot of people in the Unity Party, in the diaspora, all around, who are able to do some of these things. Some of them did not get government jobs. Some of them don't need government jobs. They only need the opportunity. And when you take this opportunity and start giving it to foreigner only because only to get crumbs out of it, then it's appalling. You don't do that. We have to be deliberate in making Liberian millionaires. When they are millionaires, when they are Liberian, legitimate Liberian millionaires, we will be certain that the millions will be in the Liberian banks. And when the millions are in the Liberian banks, the bank will be forced to loan people money with a lower interest rate. And people who have creative mind will be able to do business and generate millions for themselves. Why are we suffering our country by the stupidity of government officials?
On the basis of petty greed,
Yeah.
and personal aggrandizement. When they get the kickback, like you said, because it's dirty money, they cannot come openly with it. Unlike you forming a conglomerate as Liberians, the government providing the enabling environment, working with the commercial banks to give you that loan, to find people outside or even within the country to work along with you, to bring this kind of infrastructure, bring the necessary software, employ Liberians, build capacity, and do this. Okay? So it's just unfortunate. It's just unfortunate. That's another form of job creation. That's another way you strengthen the private
Yeah.
sector.
Our stupidity in the country has even made us to give concession on sin.
Yeah,
They call
same.
it sin money. Sin.
Even
Foreigner
asking,
come to take our own sin from under the ground and sell it to us.
yeah,
What kind of
cutback.
stupidity is that? What kind of stupidity is that? Foreigner come, take our sin off the ground and sell it to us. The foreigner come, they crush our rocks and sell it to us. Don't you understand that Liberians can become millionaires just by crushing rocks?
Just by doing same money.
Liberians can
Because
become millionaires just by
you need
crushing
supply the
rocks.
very population.
Why are we harming ourselves? You carry on a reform at the ministry and you can take the civil servant into consideration. So where you expect the people to go? They come to work
Redundancy.
and they don't have any work
Redundancy.
to do.
Redundancy.
You know?
Yeah. In fact, the most important takeaway. Look at the takeaway. The only takeaway the civil service director general wants the country to hear is that the people have not been dismissed yet.
That guy in recent time, I don't know about the past civil service directors, but that guy is the stupidest civil service director ever. He's the stupidest civil service director ever. The man is just moving all around doing all kinds of nonsense. Civil service has matured over the years. Civil service has been involved in a lot of work. You can't reinvent the wheels. There are very professional people at the civil service. You can't reinvent the wheels. Listen to advice. Follow these people, and you're going to get everything right. Why just all around the place as if to say the work of a civil service director is to dismiss people? You're passing around dismissing people. Is that the work of a civil service director?
You're supposed to be listening, protecting the civil
Yeah.
servants, listening to their crime in the event of arbitrary dismissal and suspension, making sure that they get their rightful benefits, making sure that their capacity are built, you know. But you have reduced yourself.
When was the last time we ever heard civil service director dismiss people?
Or go to a ministry to have such a meeting.
Yeah. The people will raise their grievances, right? the civil service director can go and say, oh, this is a reform, but the way the people are carrying it on is not the right way. The civil servant grievances is that the people took the function. They took the function and effectively they place us in a position of redundancy. And if we are not working, then we can take government pay free. No government is supposed to be paying people free.
No.
Government is supposed to be involved in wastage.
They're not welfare state, so it's good. So the civil service director want to introduce the welfare state. Let them pass that on for every citizen.
So instead of saying that, oh, prior to this thing, we have already had a plan, a transitional plan, and this is the plan that we explain. I mean, you got to be proactive. That is what a responsible government does. So if the civil service agency was not part of the planning process, this thing took a very long time. The civil service agency is supposed to be involved.
The LMTR team been lingering for long in the corridor.
In all of this, I don't know whether the Civil Servant Association is even functional.
They have one.
I don't know whether the Civil Servant Association is even functional.
Do they have one?
Yeah, I don't know. Because in all of this, you cannot hear the Civil Servant Association because these people started making their raising their issue at a very early stage, right? They raised their issue at a very early stage. The Civil Servant Association, if it existed, should have intervened and then deal with this situation. But this is the Liberia that we find ourselves. But we always say a better Liberia is possible. And this is why we get into these policy discussions to make sure that those who are listening, the policymakers who are listening, are able to act on some of these things. Because I can tell you that this LTMR concession is going to crumble, is going to fail because of the failure to follow the rule.
It doesn't matter what I feel, but I thought somebody pocket feel.
Yeah, but nothing that people can do. Nothing that people can do. It is on this government to be able to do the right thing. But if they have personal interest in this business and they're sacrificing the interest of the people for their personal interest, they can only go to a certain extent. They can only go to a certain extent. You know? So if a new government comes to power, they can request the LTMR for accounting. They can be audited. The LTMR can be audited. And so they should be watchful. They can be audited because the new government can argue that this contract was not consummated following the laws of our country. And if they win them in court, obviously they can go for accounting and they will obviously pay more than they pay to the government. So they should be mindful. They should be mindful. So I think we can close on this note. Commissioner Smith.
Yes, I think we should close and come back on this matter tomorrow. This matter is very delicate. The country is going to be losing revenue. The national data is going to be exposed to outsiders. Civil servants at the Ministry of Transport are being displayed and made vulnerable and put on redundancy involuntarily. The laws of the land the statute creating the Ministry of Transport has not been repealed. They didn't experience any amendment, and their statutory fiduciary responsibility is being divested. In fact, when the thing started, the transport minister said he didn't know anything about it.
He actually didn't know anything about it.
So
So
this is
why did they carry on this whole thing in secret?
a disaster, and this is a reflection or a reminder of some of the awkward concessions that we deal with Caesar Gao, that had no history and record of being mining business when they gave the concession in Bomi and Cape Mount to Caesar Gao. And once they got the concession agreements signed, the next day, in less than 24 hours, not even the next day, in less than 24 hours, they sold it to Western Cluster, complete flipping. And it seems to be we are now learning from these concessions that came and hit the country so bad.
If a Liberian came to do the same, they will resist that Liberian. The Liberian should not be a millionaire, but they expect they want other people to be a millionaire, benefit from the country. If a Liberian came to do the same and flip, they will resist that person.
I was bad business, another that better, or that person on the next try will do better. You know. Yeah, so I mean, I think we should come with more prepared bullet points outlined tomorrow to extensively go into this issue. This is a national disaster. This is going to be a calamity, and we have a role to play. We have a role to play, and that role must be to critically, scrupulously review the activities over the last few of months and to crystallize the issue, taking into consideration the cost benefit analysis. I'm interested, we need to get in touch with the transport people. I'm interested in understanding the revenue trend, the percentage of the money transport ministry were generating, whether they were withholding some and how much they were giving to the consolidated account, or whether they were giving all to the consolidated account. So we can be able to understand the percentage vis-a-vis the so-called 70% going to LMTI and 30% going to government revenue. On that note, I will be resting here.
Certainly. Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Tonight, the issue before us, before the country, is not simply a contract. It's not simply a protest at the Ministry of Transport. And it is certainly not just a disagreement between the government workers and a private company. What we are witnessing is deeper national catastrophe. It's a deeper national question. Who controls the function of the Liberian state? For generations, the Ministry of Transport has been the institution responsible for licensing, registration, and the regulation of vehicle and drivers in this country. These are not ceremonious duties. They are sovereign responsibilities. They involve public safety, national data, and state revenue. Now the country is confronted with a situation where workers are protesting because they believe the very functions of the ministry are being transferred to a private concessionaire. They fear the erosion of their jobs. They fear the erosion of institutional authority. And many Liberians are asking a broader question today. If core public service can be outsourced in this way, where does the authority of the government begins and where does it end? Can we arbitrarily assign government function to private institutions? Let us be clear. Modernization is necessary. Reform is necessary. And it has started long before this government came to power. The reform was taking shape from the beginning of the end of the civil crisis. But modernization cannot come at the expense of sovereignty. Reform cannot dismantle institutions, and partnership cannot replace government itself. This is why transparency matters. This is why legislative oversight matters. This is why the voice of the workers, citizens, and policymakers must all be heard at the Ministry of Transport. Because the question is not only about traffic management, the question is about governance. The Liberian people deserve clarity on who manages the public system, who controls the data, who collects their revenue, and who ultimately answers to the law. This movement must lead to accountability, not confusion, reform, not institutional collapse. Liberia institutions belong to the Liberian people, and that principle must never be negotiated. The legislature that represents the Liberian people knows what is best. And if they compromise the interests of the Liberian people by not respecting the laws, then it is sickening. This has been a Vote 24 TV Khaki Dialogue presentation. Thank you, Comrade Wilmot Smith, for engaging in this dialogue over the controversy at the Ministry of Transport. It has been a wonderful time with our people in the diaspora and at home. We thank you, and watch out tomorrow for another edition of the Khakis Dialogue with Vote 24 TV. At Vote 24 TV, we say a better Liberia is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade. Good night to listening.